So welcome back, healthy people, to On Call with Dr. Randy. I am your host, Dr. Randy. Today we have blogger, lover of all things sports, Ryan Jackson. Welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
Hey, how you doing? I appreciate you having me on. I'm glad to, be able to see what we can discuss about today and talk about some really good topics regarding mental health.
Good. Thanks for being on. So before we get started about the conversation regarding mental health, why do you love sports so much?
Oh, so being in grow up in the city of Atlanta, you're kind of born into a couple of different fandoms of different teams, whether it's the Falcons, the Hawks, the Braves, even back then in the day, the Thrashers. That's a real throwback right there. You're just kind of born into it. And unfortunately, Atlanta kind of drafted me into their fandom. Of course, the ups and downs of the last couple of years. So you kind of already know what I've been through. But I enjoy it. I love rooting for my team. And then, of course, participating in sports as well. Just that thrill of, getting the win, or, that nervousness going up into the last quarter or the last event that you have to run. It's just kind of nothing that's like that when you're on the competing stage. It's just a really, really good feeling. The goods and the bads, I'll say.
Right. I know the Falcons have broke your heart a couple of times. Out of all the Atlanta teams, which one is your favorite? Is it the Falcons?
Yeah, I would say the Falcons are my favorite. In between the Falcons and the Hawks. But definitely the Falcons have definitely been someone that I'm ride or die with. No bandwagon for me. The good, the bad, 28-3. It's all something that I've been a part of and kind of just written now. And we're gonna get there one day. And of course, I sound optimistic like every other fan. But hey, like I said, once you're born into it, you kind of got no choice.
Y'all not as bad as some Cowboys fans. That's another level right there.
Ooh. Yeah, nah. They're on a different level, and they got some different problems that they have to figure out, especially with Dak being out.
Right. So I wanted to have Ryan on to have a conversation on mental health. So mental health is very important, if not as much important as your physical health. So wanted to talk about what does Ryan define as mental health, and talk about depression, anxiety, things that he's went through in the past. So specifically for depression, how do you define depression for you specifically?
So it's crazy because my definition of depression has kind of changed from what place I was in a year ago to what I am now. We'll be able to talk about that. But I feel like now I feel like depression is when you come through that moment or those times in life when they just feel like it's impossible to really do anything. And what I mean by that is you can be knocking out schoolwork, you can be going to work, but you're not really feeling any of those emotions or really feeling what you're doing. It just kind of feels like you're just kind of floating through life, and not floating through life in a great way, but like you're being dragged, and you're dragging a lot with you, and you may not even know what you're even dragging, but it just feels like every day is heavy. Whether it's getting up in the morning time, whether it's doing the favorite things that you like to do, whether it's even watching your team play on Sunday. It's just like something just doesn't really feel right. It's really like a dark cloud that's kind of over you, and you can feel it, but other people sometimes can't even see it. That it's being casted over you. I feel like that's kind of what depression really feels like.
Right. And so when did you kind of start realizing for you that you start feeling some of these symptoms?
I think I realized that I had some of these symptoms a long time ago. Of course, a lot of this kind of stemmed from my parents' divorce around 13 years ago. And of course, when you're younger, you don't really understand what depression is. And it's definitely not talked about a lot in the Black community. Of course, people will say that you're sad about the situation that your parents are split apart. But there is a lot more that was with that. And I didn't really understand to the fullest about what mental health was. I thought that you just kind of just deal with it. You kind of keep going. But I definitely felt like the hard days were stacking up, and it was getting worse regarding my mood, my attitude. I was starting to get angry, less patient, and I wasn't as optimistic about the future anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened about a year ago? Because you kind of mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, so a year ago, actually, this past week was the anniversary of kind of me getting to that point where I was just too tired to keep going. So I was at the point where I was ready to take my life. And this was this past week, a year ago, which is why I say a year ago, I kind of changed the way I look at depression. But yeah, I just reached that point where I was just tired. I was exhausted mentally because, like I said, I had so much that I was dragging with me in silence, and that a lot of people didn't really know what I was really going through. And honestly, I didn't really even know what I was going through because, of course, people can ask you like, "Hey, what's wrong?" But sometimes you don't. I didn't even know what was wrong. Like the day before I went to school, I'd be fine. I'd be laughing, things like that. The next day, that facade that I was putting on was just kind of too hard, too unbearable to put on. So I couldn't smile. I was really sad. I was mad. I was angry. I was confused. And it kind of took going to therapy to being able to figure out like what really was the problem. Because I kind of stuffed a lot of stuff down because I didn't want to deal with it or face it. And honestly, sometimes some of the things that I went through, I honestly forgot that it even happened. Because I stuffed it so far down.
Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, sometimes when we get in those depressed moods, we may not realize until later on that we were depressed. I know sometimes when I've gone through times that I felt down specifically, it may be like 2-3 months later that I'm like, oh, I was feeling depressed. That's why my mood changed back then.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that something that you kind of feel like or realize too, that maybe reflecting back later sometimes, or do you realize it while you're in the midst of it?
Yeah, I think the reflection part is a big part of, when you're looking back, especially going through therapy. I was able to look back in certain moments like, wow, maybe the way I was feeling before I had a track meet or I had, practice or a test. Like, I'm like, man, maybe I was really struggling that day. And it wasn't because I was nervous about the test. It was just, I had a lot that I was holding on to and a lot that I was hiding, that it was starting to just kind of spill out and I wasn't able to suppress it anymore. So definitely the reflection piece, you can definitely look back and see those moments in time in your life that you were like, yeah, that depression was really beating up on me at that time of life. Mm-hmm. For sure.
So what was specifically kind of going on that got you to that point, approximately a year ago when you start feeling suicidal that day?
Yeah. So I would say the depression piece is a snowball that turns into an avalanche the longer that you don't deal with it. You can suppress it, you can kind of hide it, you can try to bring in things like alcohol or drugs or anything else. But at the end of the day, it's just going to keep piling up because you're not addressing it. It's only when you address it and kind of face those demons, and it's a rough process. But until you address those demons, like they're just going to keep getting worse. If the temporary fixes, they feel good in the moment. It may last a month, it may last a year, but eventually, it's gonna get to a point where you're unable to control your emotions, your actions, how you feel, and then you just get to a point where you honestly just don't care. And that's probably the most dangerous part is when you stop caring about how you interact with other people and how you treat yourself.
Mm-hmm. What does it feel like to kind of not care when you know personally that you should care about this, the way it affects other people and especially affects you? But what happens internally when you feel like I just don't care anymore?
Yeah, for me, I got to a point, I would say maybe around last June, where I got to a point where I knew that I didn't want to be here for much longer. And of course, that's not something that is easily conveyed to other people. But inside, I knew that I didn't want to be here for much longer. And that's kind of when I kind of got reckless in what I was doing, how I loved myself, how I loved others, being in a relationship at that time. I stopped caring about that relationship, honestly. I stopped fighting, to survive. Because at that point, I was just trying to survive. And it's a fight every day. But I got to a point where I was just too tired to fight. And it's really rough when you reflect on that. Like it's kind of just like you kind of give up. Like a team is, in the fourth quarter, and you may not see that there's an opportunity to win the game. But yeah, I just got to a point where I just couldn't see any way out of it, without having to address the sort of things that had happened prior to, and I was terrified of doing that. So I got to a point where that just wasn't an option for me. And then, of course, that's when I stopped really just caring about life and just caring about, the people around me like that. Even though it's weird because you feel the love from other people, but it just doesn't really penetrate because you just got into a place where it just doesn't affect you anymore.
Right. And so you feeling the love from the other people, but how much does that self-love that you need outweigh that you need the love from those other people?
Yeah, it's one thing to receive love, but if you can't love yourself, I think that's a problem that a lot of us have, in this world, that we receive a lot of love, but at the end of the day, if you can't really love yourself, away from that, then it's really hard, to be able to understand and actually really receive the love from other people. Because then you're just kind of just pushing it away. You're like, oh, that person, I know they care about me, but I mean, I don't really know if I really even care about myself. So it's kind of like an armor and a shield that you kind of put up around yourself, and not allowing that love to kind of penetrate and even help. Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the reasons I want to make sure that I wore this hoodie today with my heart on it, is because dealing with this conversation and just talking about this, one thing that I just want to do is like spread love with this conversation. And like what you mentioned earlier about some of my patients that I talked to, a lot of them like having suicidal thoughts. I remember one specifically telling me that I just wish that someone could just erase me from this world and I would be gone. I wonder what the world would be like without me. That's kind of hard to hear specifically, but I know it's even harder to feel. So when you're going through those like suicidal thoughts, is it something that day, like something just hits, or it's like a buildup of constantly thinking about this day by day, developing a plan and how you're going to do this that you eventually kind of got to?
Yeah. I think for me that it was a buildup, and then you get to a point where you don't want to keep going through that pain anymore. So the only other way to get there's only two really options that you have to be able to get through that. You can either talk about it with someone and maybe try to find help, or you can kind of try to make the pain stop immediately. And for me, I chose the latter option. Was kind of what I decided on. But I feel like you go through those moments, and then you may experience something that's kind of like the deal breaker. So for me that day, of course, I talked about my relationship. At the time, I was trying to kind of resolve the issue and try to plead my case of, hey, I've changed, I'm going to get help. But when the person has kind of already made their decision and they've already been through so much with you, and they start to see that you're not even wanting to fight for yourself, you start to push people away. And basically on that day, what she said basically was that I understand that you may have love for me, but I'll never love you in the same way to be in a relationship with you. And because she was like the one person I was kind of holding on to try to keep me afloat, when she said that kind of really, really broke me. Looking back, it's just like, man, Ryan, like that's what broke you. But in that moment, when you're going through heartbreak and when you're going through depression and you're just kind of hold on to at least something, that was the deal breaker for me. And that was really all I had after she said that. And that's nothing on her. She was, at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you have to look out for yourself. And that's exactly what she was doing. But of course, when you're fighting and trying to hold on to anything, when you hear something like that, that's probably that's the worst thing that I could have probably heard in that moment. And that was definitely my breaking point right there, to be able to just say that, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and make this decision.
Yeah, it could be any little comment that just kind of knocks over one little beam and makes the whole house fall down and crumble.
Yeah.
So that's why I always
Yeah.
tell
Definitely.
people you never know what people are going through inside that they may or may not talk to you about. So
Yep.
what happened, or what kind of intervention happened that stopped you from committing suicide?
Yeah. So the crazy thing is that throughout this, me and my ex, we still had each other's location, just shared from our relationship, and we, it was never, I don't think we ever stopped sharing it after that. I think it was like kind of off and on. But once I kind of disappeared, um, she did get kind of concerned. She got in contact with my mom, my sister, and my dad actually, and they ended up having my dad look for me. He looked everywhere because he had my location. It just so happened that my location pinged to the location I was at without me even really knowing. I can't remember what I was doing with my phone at the time that allowed for my location to come back on, because I did have it on airplane mode for a long time. But I think there was a brief moment in time that maybe I checked the messages or something. And because of that, I turned my phone back on. It pinged my location. So my dad was able to pinpoint where I was. And literally probably like an hour before I was going to, take my life, he was able to find me where I was. And that's really what saved my life. So the person that I felt like, kind of ruined my life in that moment. It was kind of like the last straw, the breaking point for me, was actually a person that played a big part in actually really finding me and giving me a second chance at life. And that's kind of funny how life works.
Right.
Yep.
Did you what was the plan?
So I was going to overdose. I had my pills. I was already planning. I already knew what I was going to do. Yep.
And did she was already worried about you? Like, had y'all had conversations in the past that made her concerned that something like this may happen in the future?
If I remember, I may have said something, at the end. You know how you say, how like when someone says something that you don't agree with and you try to say something to make them feel bad about what they said. I think I said something like in that manner, and I think it kind of concerned her enough to be able to try to, to get in contact with my dad and my sister. And I know that took like a lot of effort, because that's not just, I don't think she had their phone numbers or anything. So she probably had to look through social media. So like I said, I'm very appreciative of the three of them, but I'm very appreciative of her, because I definitely wouldn't have been here without, her being able to reach out to my sister and my dad.
That showed how much she loved and cared about you, even in the midst of kind of what y'all were going on personally in y'all relationship between each other. How happy and relieved were you when your dad found you?
I would say that me as a person, I was not relieved, because I knew that I was going to have to face a lot of things I didn't want to face. But I would say the most important thing is the inner child in me was thrilled that he found me. I think he was the best person that could have found me, because he was kind of the reason why a lot of the trauma that I had kind of started. Him being a big reason why my parents did divorce. I think that inner child in me was relieved that he found me. Because I think, honestly, the inner me was the one that was really hurting the most, because he had really never healed. That little boy in me had never really healed. So I think he was really thrilled in that moment. And it took the outer me to finally, eventually become thankful that he did find me.
So what was kind of his response when he found you? Because I don't know if he did or didn't know that what was about to go on with you. Did he think you were just kind of running away, needed some time to yourself?
Yeah, he did. Being that my dad is a little bit more old school, I never really felt comfortable talking to him about my mental health, just because I didn't feel like he was going to receive it the way that I kind of needed him to. So he was, I think he thought I just kind of ran away. I needed a break. But that night I was able to kind of talk to him and lay into him. I did lay into him about a lot of the things that I was going through. And that he was the reason why a lot of the things I was going through were kind of his fault. And honestly, it felt really good to be able to be on the other side of just being able to tell him what I was really going through. And it took a lot off my chest in that moment that I was really holding back for a long time. So it honestly really did feel good. It felt a lot of relief to be able to finally get it off my chest about how I really felt.
And how receptive was he to the things that you were telling him? Was he a good active listener?
So originally, I think he was a little taken aback because he didn't realize how angry I was at him. So of course he was a little bit more defensive in the beginning, but then once he realized, like, okay, wow, like he was really hurting, and he's still hurting from that moment. And even though maybe I've moved on from that situation, like he hasn't. And I think after a while, he finally was like, hey, like, no, you're completely right. So like I said, I'm very appreciative of him being able to be receptive, because he could have just, kind of still been dismissive about the whole situation, and just took a chance to be able to listen to me. And that's kind of really all I guess I really needed all along.
So parents have a tremendous influence in all the things that we go through in life. And it's a lot of trauma sometimes from things in the past that they may have done to us or done to the entire family that transitions on to us as adults. So with you, like you mentioned earlier, realizing some of the things that you were feeling back when you were a teenager were signs of depression. What are some of the things that you kind of reflect on as an adult that you look back as a teenager and being like, well, I was acting out because of this, or depressed? Like, what kind of symptoms did you kind of reflect on about you being a teenager and going through?
Yeah, I think I was angry because I missed out on a lot of experiences, like with my parents being together. I love my mom, and she did everything that she was supposed to do, and maybe even more. But there's nothing like having your dad in the house, and having your dad grow with you. And I really feel like I missed out on that portion of life, being a kid and being able to, drive in the car with him and have him take me to practice, or have him pick me up for practice. Of course he was at events, but it's nothing like having those moments, before events, or, being able to have him take me to a game. It kind of changed, the outlook of even probably where he wanted to be in life. And I saw those struggles, and it definitely took a toll on me. So looking back, I definitely feel like I missed out on a lot of, a lot of growth, as a young man, because he wasn't there. So that took a lot of forgiving and over time. Yeah.
Because as you talk, I'm kind of thinking and reflecting over here, because you mentioned he left the house and they kind of separated when you were 13, and that's your transition from going from a boy to a man. And I'm assuming he was all in the household before that. So it's a major adjustment, specifically at that time period of your life.
Especially being at that age and being, of course, with a single mom at the time, you kind of become the man of the household in a way. And I don't necessarily like the concept of that, but that's kind of just kind of the role that you kind of are put into, as being the man of the household. And I wasn't ready to be that. I wasn't ready to be that at all. I think eventually I just kind of pushed through it. But then I started to get kind of angry, because I was not only trying to figure out who am I, who is Ryan Jackson. I didn't feel like I was a kid anymore. I feel like I had to grow up, kind of young. And I wasn't able to enjoy, being a kid at that age, or a young boy at that age. So I feel like I definitely missed out on a lot of that. In that inner child, as I kept growing up, he was missing a lot of what he kind of earned for. But it was because I was getting older. I can't feed him the way that I should have, if I was at that age anymore. Because of course, life as you grow up gets, more challenges, as you grow up, of course. Yeah.
All right. So for you specifically, what is it like going from being a child to being the man of the household? Like, are you having to go get a job to bring in extra money? Are you having to cut the grass more often, take out the trash? What is Ryan at age 13 or 14 being the man of the household look like at that time?
Um, I think there's different ways to look at it. I think, of course, in some situations, cutting the grass and maybe having to get, like a grocery bag job, that's for some. But I think more so mentally, I had to be the man of the household. For me, is how I kind of had to was the role I kind of had to play. Um, Unfortunately, so mentally, I had to kind of grow up, even though I was a kid. If that kind of makes sense, I had to be more mature in how I, respectfully deal with my mom. If she was telling me something, like I knew that I couldn't add any more stress that she was already feeling. But I also understood like I'm not feeling the best either. But it just kind of made me have to be a little bit more mature at that age than I probably would have wanted to. Like I feel like that age, you're supposed to have fun. Like you're supposed to enjoy life. Like life shouldn't feel like you're dragging, a whole boat behind you. Like it should feel like you're having fun. Like that's middle school. You should go to school every day and have fun and learn and be able to learn more about yourself. But I feel like I just kind of had my maturity had to kind of speed up, but eventually got to a point where I had kind of tapped myself out. And I no longer wanted to, kind of grow up. Like I wanted to be able to be a kid. But of course, like I said earlier, like life just that's just not how life works. Yeah.
Did you ever get a chance to stop pulling the boat?
Did I ever get a chance to stop? I think joining sports, I know that's kind of like circle back, but joining sports allowed me to help me during that time, stop pulling the boat for at least a brief second. So running track, being out on the track by myself, and just being able to focus on what I want to focus on, was a big help and was kind of therapy at that time without me even knowing that it was therapy. Just those, few minutes or seconds that you're out there just running, you're not, nobody else is your focus. It's just you, was really big for me during that time. And I think it really kept me afloat, in a lot of ways, without me even knowing, during that time. So I would say sports kind of saved my life in another way as well. And I think it kept me alive a lot longer, than maybe had I not had like a hobby or something that I was really good at.
Mm-hmm. So during this whole time period with Ryan transitioning from being a boy to a man, did you and your mom get closer during this time period?
Yeah, so we went through a time where I was really angry, like angry, and it was at a point where my mom could have made a decision where she probably could have, called the police on me a couple of times, but she didn't. She was very patient with me. And I'm very appreciative of that because I wasn't angry at her. I wasn't angry at her. I think I was angry at myself. I think I was really confused at the time. But I got to a point where, like I understood, like she really was supportive and very patient with me. And despite me being angry, like she loved me. Like there wasn't any, she didn't push me away, she, if anything, she brought me in even closer because she knew she knew I needed love. She may not known why I was angry, but she did know that I needed love. So I'm very appreciative of her for that. And because of that, over the years, we have grown closer and closer. And I think the events within this last year have even brought us even more closer. Like we're about to take a trip this Saturday to go to see like a waterfall and like a trail and just spend some time with each other. So, of course, I think sometimes certain events like this, they bring, you closer to certain people in your life. For sure. So, and definitely shout out to her.
So you said you was angry and then you said you was angry. So what is angry for Ryan?
I think angry was like, it was a cry for help. I feel like angry is when you're just kind of frustrated, but I think it was a cry for help, but me not knowing what to say. And it wasn't school. It wasn't, sports. It was the events that had happened, years prior to that. Me trying to convey that, but at the time I still didn't really know how to communicate that. And that would only take, a couple more years later for me to be able to finally be able to communicate that. But at the time, I just knew that I needed love, and I needed someone to just say that it was going to be okay. Because it was just a lot of things that were going on at that time mentally, that I just wasn't able to, to convey, like I said. But I think it was definitely a cry for help. It was me being super angry. I think a lot of people, when they get to that point of just being really angry, like that's just a cry for help. That's like the last thing that they know that they can do to try to get maybe some attention. Like, hey, that person may need some help, and it's just kind of sad that a lot of people kind of get ignored and they get just deemed crazy, because, they're just, people from the outside are looking at them like that person's just crazy. But in a lot of cases, that's their cry for help, literally like their last cry for help.
Right. So a lot of my listeners, they may not be going through depression or anxiety, but they may be having some children who are having the same symptoms that you had back then when you were kind of transitioning from a boy to a man. And you said that your mom expressed love towards you and helped you out in your situation. So in what ways do you recognize or felt like that she expressed love towards you in those situations?
I think she kind of was able to bring me back down to kind of earth. Because when you get so angry, it's like you kind of just see red, and you don't even know what you're angry about. Sometimes, of course, when you're younger, you don't really know how to some kids don't know how to express themselves. There are a lot of kids nowadays that really are really great at expressing themselves. But at the time, I didn't. But when you see your child, like express themselves in a certain way that's like could be angry or it could be sad, those are the moments when you have to kind of stop what you're doing, and those are the best times to just hey, what's going on, and just kind of show them love, because a lot of times, because they're not able to communicate was actually the problem. Sometimes just showing them a little bit of attention, and maybe even going out to do something that they love, whether it's maybe just go play basketball. Those type of things are are very helpful in those moments of anger or sadness or just confusion. Definitely.
So since the incident last year, like, how did your mom take that whole situation, and how have y'all grown together?
Of course, she's very concerned, because I don't think any parent wants to have their child reach that point of not wanting to be here. No parent. But she also understood that it was going to be on me to be able to figure out, like, if I was going to take my mental health serious and actually really seek help. Because you can get someone therapy, you can sign them up for classes, but at the end of the day, if that person doesn't want to do the work to be able to get better, it's not going to go anywhere. And that's just the reality of it. Like, you have to want it yourself. You can have the support of a million other people, but at the end of the day, you're the one that's in that class, on that call. You have to be the one that's able to, uncover a lot of the stuff that you went through and talk about it, and actually, tell the therapist, like, this is what I'm going through today. Like, you actually have to really do the work. But she pushed me. She pushed me to be able to eventually, start to love therapy. I would be honest. I'd be like, coming off the call, of course, my therapist at the time didn't know, but I definitely left out a lot of details in my initial few sessions, just because I was still, terrified to actually really talk about a lot of the things. But eventually I got to a point where I was comfortable, and I actually was just like, hey, you know what? A couple of sessions ago, I might have left out a couple of details. This is actually really what happened. Because I understood the fact that my therapist, wanted to help me. Like, he wasn't against me. He wasn't there to shame me. He wasn't there to laugh at me. He was there to help me. So if I use those tools completely, like, I have to use them, to the fullest, because he's there for me, to be able to help me. So I think that was the biggest part of her being able to push me, and just, after every session, just saying that she was proud of me, for doing so.
Were you seeing a therapist before this?
So I think initially I did try. I think that was around like July. I think it was more so just to do it, to try to kind of save my relationship, but not really doing it because I wanted to do it for myself, if that makes sense. So I did try. I think it maybe lasted maybe like 3 weeks, but I didn't really get anything from it. It was more so just, like, hey, I'm doing therapy, I'm doing good. But it wasn't necessarily meaningful, or impactful. It wasn't until, after my suicide attempt that I finally was able to actually have a therapist that I actually, went to and actually really seeked his help.
Yeah. So talk to me a little about the process of finding a therapist. Did you go to your primary care doctor and they suggested someone, or reached out to some family members, friend? You went on TikTok and searched therapists. What'd you do?
So actually my mom, she has such a big network. She actually was connected with someone that actually knew a therapist that they recommended for me to reach out to. And I think literally that night that she asked for the recommendation, we had the initial call with the therapist and we got started literally that next week. So luckily my mom was able to find someone, but there's a lot of great therapists out there. They're everywhere. Like I said, you can find them on TikTok. They always have their links in their bio. It's really just about finding the one that you're going to mesh well with, that's going to allow you to be your true, authentic self with. So for me, I knew that I wanted another man as my therapist, because I needed to be able to. There's some things that you can't talk to with another woman, that you need to talk to with another man with, if that makes sense. And to be able to hear his experiences with life, I think that was something that I really seeked. Of course, the last year, I've been able to get closer with a lot of men in my life, whether it's my uncle, or my two uncles, other men, other mentors. I definitely really have grown my village of the men in my life to be able to, have a really great influence on me. I'm very appreciative of them, including my therapist and my dad, definitely.
That's good that you knew what type of therapist that you were looking for specifically and what that therapist could bring to you. Like, I've been doing therapy probably year and a half, 2 years, but I wanted to get a woman therapist to give me a woman's opinion on different things and have somebody outside of my guy circle to shed light on other things. So when you're looking for a therapist, you got to sit down, make a list of things that you want that therapist to talk to you about and how you want them to talk to you. So that's one of my suggestions for my listeners. Did you ever think about, or did you ever feel like you needed to be on any medication to help you out with your mood? Or did you just feel like you needed to talk out the things that were going on?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just I needed to talk about it, because I was holding it in. There was kind of just like I was poisoning myself because I was holding it in and not talking about it. And once I was able to learn how to talk about it and get things off my chest in that moment, like if I'm going through something right now, I'll be able to tell you, like Dr. Randy, right now I'm exhausted because I work out in the morning time. I have my internship and I work every single night. That's what I do. Those are the things I do. I'm exhausted. Even on this phone call right now, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. But I'm able to communicate that instead of getting on this call and just moping around and just, I'm yawning and you're like, what is going on? But I'm able to physically communicate that now. So now the people around me are like, oh, okay, Ryan, he's already voiced it. He's exhausted. When he leaves his internship, he has another job. So today we may just give him a little bit of a lighter load today, and then whatever's left, we finish and we knock it out tomorrow. So that piece, being able to communicate, is a big reason why I'm at the place I am now, and being able to be vulnerable, and just really share what I'm going through in that moment, and not being scared to let other people know, and not want to just hold on to it, and just kind of stuff it down.
No. So it seems like it's been able to help you to better verbalize things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I definitely, in life up to this point, like I just was not good at communicating. I'm a really great listener. Like if you wanted to talk to me on the phone for 3 hours about what you're going through, that's great. As soon as you ask me, hey Ryan, how are you feeling? Oh yeah, I'm good. I'm all right. And then I would just try to pivot right back to, oh, so you said what about that person? Just to try to to segue back to let you talk. Because I was not a big talker. Whether it was family events or anything, just not big at sharing. But it's been a complete 180 from this over this past year with me regarding communication being more talkative and just sharing, what I'm going through. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way here.
Especially,
I'm an introvert that likes to socialize. An introvert that likes to socialize. I'm not a big talker, even though I started a podcast, which doesn't make any sense at all.
that's how
Yeah,
life works
yeah, it's
sometimes.
definitely getting me outside of my comfort zone. But that's what therapy, I think, helped me out as well, getting comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations. Because previously, those things would make me feel just so drained and tired, like you were just kind of expressing earlier. But just knowing that getting those thoughts out and those feelings out takes less work than keeping those feelings in, because it takes a whole lot to just ball up those feelings or keep them kind of weighted on your back. So how much has writing helped you out in expressing yourself? Because I know you do your blogging.
Yeah. So my blog. So that's definitely something that I've always loved to write. Whether it's fiction, nonfiction, that was something that I always loved to do. Not on the level of wanting to be maybe like even like a journalist, but just being able to freely write about my experiences has been something that I've really loved to do. Honestly, it's even more therapy for myself than I do it for writing it for other people. Just being able to write it down and type and stay up all night and reflect on maybe a time in life that I was going through. And then the extra piece is if it impacts somebody else, that's even better. Because not only am I, using this as a form of therapy, but I'm also able to, to impact other people that may be in the same situation as me or even approaching the same situation as me. Especially as men, I think that's my main focus is for men to learn how to be vulnerable, and it is not a scary thing to be vulnerable. I think that it kind of gets a bad light through social media being vulnerable, people taking advantage of you, but that's just not the reality. A lot of people want to know what you're going through so that they can help you. And then not only that, you're also going to be able to help the other people around you in your friend groups, especially as men. I feel like we hold on to a lot of stuff. And if they see you being able to share a lot of things, they're going to follow suit as well. Sometimes it just takes that one person to kind of change the perspective on what it feels like to share actually what you're really going through. Yeah.
Right. Because more people are watching you more than you realize. The influence that you have over them, you may not even know. They may not express to you. They over there, people watching from a distance, the things that you're doing. They may read your blog, but don't tell you, but reading your blog may help them to go to therapy. Who suggested for you to start your blog?
So it's going to be the sound like the craziest thing, but literally maybe a year before I even started, I knew that I wanted to, even going through my depression, I knew I wanted to write about my experiences. So I knew that I wanted to start a blog and talk about, but maybe it was going to be from a different perspective. Maybe the topics were going to be a little bit darker, but I still wanted to be able to express myself through my blogs. So I knew that I wanted to write, but of course I kept pushing it back and being like, maybe next month, because I was just going through so much at the time. But then through therapy, I was just like, I'm going to start it. I'm just going to do it. So I released my first post on my birthday last year, November 17th. So I was really proud of myself for finally doing it, because for so long I would always push stuff back or not do it at all and not go through with it. But this is like the first thing that I actually really went through with, that I can say that I actually was like, yeah, I did this wholeheartedly, and I said I was going to release it, and I did it. So I was really proud of myself for that.
So as we wrap up, if there's someone who's listening who's in a dark place right now, mentally, physically, all of the above, what kind of tips would you give them to help them get out of that dark place?
Well, off top, I would say give yourself grace. Grace is the biggest thing that I learned through therapy, and honestly is the number one thing that I use every single day in life. Yes, there's going to be hard times. There's going to be good times as well. But in those bad times, give yourself grace. Like, you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be hard days. There's going to be people that are not rooting for you. There's going to be people that are going to hate on you. There's people that's not going to like you. But give yourself grace. Say what you did good, learn from the bad, and then come back the next day and give it everything that you got. Whether it's 10%, 15%, 99%, just give everything that you got to it. And just grace. That's the biggest part. Just give yourself grace. This world is already hard on us, especially learning now as in a young adult. Like, it's hard. Being in your 20s is hard. And of course, the older that you get, the more responsibilities that you have. But just give yourself grace. Every single day that you're alive is another chance to be able to turn the tables around. And I know that right now it probably looks real rough right now. The tunnel is real dark, but I promise you there's a light at the end of that tunnel. And just take every single day to work on one thing that you can work on and just focus on that. But yeah, give yourself grace for sure.
That's good words right there. And find some way, as hard as it is, to find some way to love yourself. Like, it's easier said than done, but find that inner love and not try to get it from an outside source. If you're not loving yourself, like, nobody else is going to love you more than the way it loves you. All right. And so I always end my podcast with Randy's random questions. Are you ready, Ryan?
I like it. I'm ready.
All right. So random question number 1. So if you could play any professional sport, which sport would it be and why?
I'm track and field. It's crazy because actually right now I'm training and preparing to in the springtime trial for a professional team. So I'm doing a lot of the work right now to eventually to try out for that. So that's definitely on the prayer list and on the bucket list to be able to get onto a pro team. Yep.
Okay.
So I would say track and field.
So what event? You can't leave us just hanging, just track and field. So broad.
Yeah. So the 800 is my main race. And then of course I want to be able to also run the 400 as well. But the 800, that's my bread and butter right there.
All right. So why do you like the 800?
I like the 800 because it's the hardest race out there. Like, there's nothing harder than the 800. It's a sprint for 2 laps. It used to be something that you could, sprint 1 lap, but nowadays it's a dogfight. And I love that feeling of, like, I know every single time I step into the track for the 800 meter, it's about to be a dogfight. Like, the 8 people that are, lining up next to me, like, we're all about to be out here fighting. Well, some people are going to go hard on the first lap. Some people are going to go hard on the last lap, but it's going to be a dogfight no matter what. And just being out there for those 2 laps, something about that middle ground between a 400 being 1 lap and then a mile being 4 laps, that 2 laps of just having those 2 laps of just like peace, or nothing that you can hear, is just like the footsteps. And, of course, I'm running under 2 minutes. Of course, you have that amount of time, but it's just therapeutic. And just, it's nothing like it. It's hard to explain until you actually really run it. But that last 200 meters, when you see it on the TV, like, and you see their facial expressions, like, you see like the passion and the hard work really comes out in that last 200 meters on an 800. And that passion it's nothing like it. It's a really euphoric feeling.
Shout out to all them runners. I'm out there running my neighborhood, but I ain't running for no medal. I'm just running to stay in shape for my hilly neighborhood. I'll be huffing and puffing out there.
It's important. Yeah.
All right. So question number 2, last question. What is peace for Ryan?
Peace. I feel like peace for me right now is the fact that I know that every single day that I wake up, that I have another chance at being a better Ryan Jackson. I feel like that's peace for me. In the past, peace was something that I was looking for and I earned, and I didn't really know how to achieve. But just going through what I've been through this past year, like, peace, like, every single day is like, even though I'm tired, I may be exhausted physically or even mentally, but I know that I'm in a place where I'm better than I was a year ago, and I'm better than I was yesterday. So that's peace for me, Just every single day, like I said, that I have, a chance to be alive and being able to work on myself, that's peace. It really is.
Okay, that's what's up. I don't know if you can associate peace with the Falcons. That's another story, but we're gonna pray on those Falcons. 28-3. 28-3, man. So how do people find more out about you, about your blog, social media stuff, if you want to throw that information out?
Yeah, so you can find me on social media at just RY underscore Christopher. That's my personal page. And then my blog page is Pain Behind A Facade. And that's my blog and also my website. So you can find those. If you want to look for me on there, I'll be on there. And then on my social page as well. You can definitely contact me, reach out to me. If you want to reach out to me through my blog, you can also do that as well. It's very appreciative, and I definitely do try to reach back out to anyone that reaches out to me, for sure.
Have people like kind of reach out to you after reading your story and hearing your story?
Yeah, people reach out to me all the time, like, just thank you so much for being able to post this and be vulnerable with yourself. So it feels really great when you have people reach out to me, and they're able to be vulnerable and just say thank you for for me writing the piece, or they took at least one thing away from it. It really does mean a lot.
Right. Yeah. So thank you for being on here and being vulnerable and sharing your story. The things that you discussed and said today may change somebody's life, may save somebody's life, may change the way they kind of interact with their family members, with their own children, their parents as well. They may go address some issues and talk to them just based upon your story and being open and honest. So I really appreciate you for being on my podcast.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me on here. And like I said, I just hope that maybe if I can impact one person, that means a lot. I think that's my main goal. At least try to impact one person. If many more follow, that's great. But saving one person's life, that's an amazing feeling. To be able to do that.
All right, appreciate it, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem, Dr. Randy. Thank you so much. Yeah.